So yeah, it's September 2025, and if you would believe it, the current state of the UFC sees Bruno Brazil. I mean, Carlos Prates is there too, but this is literally the best fighting nerd. This is the fighting nerd with the most upside in the entire UFC promotion. Bruno Brazil. This is who we've got. Because the entire mantle is just completely fallen off today. Today I'm going to break down what we just watched on stream. Thank you guys for showing up to the live event, my fight companion for Season 9, Week 8 of Dana White's Contender Series. We got some really good performances, some familiar faces. We saw Charles Oliveira on the broadcast today. He was there in support of a fighter in the opening fight. We also saw Charles Jourdain, whose little brother was fighting. I'm not sure if I presume it's his little brother. I think it is his little brother. He fought and he won a contract today. And then the fighting nerds have further receded in the power rankings of MMA gyms who bring up premier athletes in the sport. So let's talk about all of it. There's also a guy with the last name Pinas. And I was doing the slides beforehand, and I just kind of blindly copied and pasted his name in. I think that his last name is written on Tapology was Pasgal, but they were calling him Damian Pinas. So yeah, Pinas. So yeah, the first fight, both of these fighters had a lot of upside on paper. Each of them belonged to the Khabib camp and the Charles Oliveira camp respectively. These are a couple of massive flyweights too. They each had really solid strengths. Rashid Vagabov was a Taekwondo striker, but he's also a good wrestler since he comes from that Dagestani group. Trained with Abdulmanap, and I was talking about it with the chat. There's a difference between, training with Khabib. Brian Zerker trained with Khabib, and he got sunned, right? There's other fighters who have came and gone through that Dagestan camp and have said that they've trained with Khabib and they haven't been worth anything, right? But whenever you train with Abdulmanap, that's an entirely different experience, and that hails you to be something in this sport. You're going to accomplish something if you've trained with Abdulmanap himself. Peace be with his soul. But I guess not this time, because Paulo Henrique was in there, stalling him. Vagabov was a 7-1 favorite in this fight, and he did win, but it was just such a boring fight. He came out and he looked really sharp on the feet. They went from degrading his skills as a striker and diminishing his ability to finish fights on the feet, Michael Bisping at least, to glazing him within 30 seconds once he started letting his hands go and throwing kicks. But what Henrique de Silva did was just initiate clinches and freeze the action. And Vagabov would end up winning these grappling exchanges every single time, but they weren't scrambling with any type of urgency, and there was a whole lot of just lay and pray going on. Even through back take positions that Vagabov would get, he wouldn't even be attacking submissions. He would just be chilling there. And time would just fly off the clock, and he would get minutes on minutes of control. And it kind of created the impression that he was struggling since he wasn't able to finish. I would have never guessed that the fight would have been as stinky as it was just based off of the first round. Vagabov just really didn't want to get knocked out, and neither did Henrique either. They just didn't want to get folded, either of them. And it made for a really boring fight because nobody was pocket exchanging. At one point at the very end of the second round, Vagabov shouted, "This is for you, Dana," and then throws 2 body kicks that landed really hard and then just does nothing. Comes out into the third round and just stinks it up. This guy escaped from the Muhammad Makayev factory, and he didn't even get a contract for his W either. You got to really have a very special it factor or have a more interesting decision than what this was if you want to get a contract off of the strength of going up to Dana after the fight and then being I'm sorry that wasn't the best performance, but give me a contract and I promise I'll be champion. This guy was saying that he's going to be UFC champion, and then how to fight this competitive with the dude who he was such a massive favorite over, which that's not going to get you to where you're trying to go on the Contender Series. We need blood and guts, and that's exactly what we got for pretty much every single fight after this. So this is more like it. I'm going to have very little to say about each of the fights after this just because they all finished so quickly, and thank God for that because, this is kind of what we're banking on whenever we're watching the Contender Series. We want to see these finishes that take less than a round, maybe a round and some change. This is good for us. This is good for our viewership. If fights do get dragged into the second or third round on the Contender Series, things need to be happening. And that should be adding to the case of the winner getting their contract based off of the activity that they have in the fight. I appreciate high-level grappling and even striking chess matches too, but that shouldn't come at the expense, these types of fights, they shouldn't come at the expense of things actually happening in them. And that's what people are oh yeah, you're a casual because you don't want to see people jab and leg kick and feint at range for 15 minutes, or you don't want to see this guy just sit on this dude's back and keep him from transitioning for 5 minutes and then do it again for 2 more rounds afterwards. You're right, I don't. MMA is such an action-packed sport that there's something seriously wrong transpiring whenever it feels like a punishment to get through a fight. It's a fight. Like, you know, it should be lit every time. I don't know. That's just my opinion. This fight was super turned. And the only thing that I really have to say is, like, it's critiques on the way that Kurtis Campbell presents himself, which, I mean, is so irrelevant to the performance that he put on. Let's talk about the performance first. All right, so Demba Seck, very scary West African fighters that they got on this card to fight with. Just Brazilians. They got scary West African fighters to get on the card to fight with. This guy from England. These guys all look like they're chiseled from stone, but, I mean, eye tests, they don't really matter past a certain point. I mean, once the bell rings, you're going to see what each of the fighters can do, and these guys kind of underdelivered. Every single one except for the guy in the final fight. So, I mean, let's talk about this fight first. Demba Seck, he wasn't really putting offense on Kurtis Campbell before Kurtis Campbell got a trip and then just started smashing Demba Seck on the ground. Demba Seck opened with a body kick, which was caught, and that's how the takedown was initiated, and from there, it was all Kurtis Campbell. This was a perfect showing from Kurtis Campbell. He flowed through positions, like, masterfully. He showed aggression in grappling sequences, which favored him. He got Demba up against the cage, and then he threw a knee. Demba was relying on the fact that his hand was down, ruling him to be a grounded opponent. He was likely thinking that he was going to get some time to rest after this. But nope, Movsar Evloev ruined that for everybody. So no more grounded opponent just from having your hand posted on the ground. It doesn't go like that anymore. So Demba Seck, he was still in a finishing sequence, even after he had thought that there was a foul that was committed. He kind of just keeled over afterwards, even though he was still conscious. He sits into Kurtis Campbell like with his guard raised, and he looks really coherent, but then Kurtis Campbell just swarms him, and then the ref has seen enough at a certain point. And this point was not too short after he had been dropped. So, I mean, this was a TKO win. This wasn't even like a dominant grappling victory that led to a submission. Like, this guy got knocked out. But holy chopped. Kurtis Campbell is man. He has by far the most unflattering glasses I've ever seen a human male wear. And I don't like how, I mean, it's irrelevant because he won a contract and he's doing super well for himself. Congratulations to him first and foremost, no matter what I'm about to say. But dude, the glasses, mate, what you doing? And then he wears a man bun at the front of his head and it like sticks out this way. It's like, man, I would be so pissed off if I was Demba Seck and I lost to a guy like this, and like he's screaming, he's talking to Dana, and he puts on those Coke bottle glasses, and he just looks like such a dweeb, dude, like literally nerd emoji. But it doesn't matter because he's the victor, and he got this one done in emphatic fashion. This was one of those performances where like you could definitely tell that this man was going to get a contract, and he did. So I mean, absolutely snuffed out Demba Seck. The eye test does not matter in MMA. It's about what you know and what your skills are. Same thing for this fight. Christopher Alvidrez versus Eliezer Kubanza. Alright, so Kubanza came up in the Congo, and like his highlight reel was him kicking tote bags full of clothes that were dangling from trees and having backyard fights. It looked like he was in the yard, like the UFC map, like the cage, and you're wearing jean shorts and stuff. That's literally where this man was fighting. Bare knuckle fights. They look like Valley Tudo style fights here, and he was getting knockouts, but I mean, they definitely overstated his ability to have an effect against a guy who went through a legitimate MMA promotion coming from this disadvantaged background. Alvidrez, he grew up in a town that I interned at in my last year of college called San Pedro, and like he was talking about his hard upbringing, and I can attest to the fact that he definitely had it hard growing up because this was an area, man. This was like the trap. Yeah. He was talking about food stamps and like extreme poverty in his household. I'm glad that he's on his way to delivering his family from this and making a way for himself. But yes, it was exactly like that. I saw it at every single corner in that town where I was working that journalism internship. He got into a really nasty car crash and then got into fighting afterwards. Luckily, there was no long-term damage, skin grafting, or anything that was required that would have made this fighting career harder for him. He recovered nicely, got into fighting, is finding success in it now. This is a Combate Global guy too. Combate Global, those guys literally come to the Contender Series and they fight or die every single time. I love it. They're such a violent bunch. I know that the UFC likes to take prospects from this organization as well because they know exactly what they're getting every time. An insanely violent fighter who's willing to slug until his opponent is knocked out or he gets knocked out himself. And it's like that every single time. Alvidrez, he had swag in the cage as well, and he was emoting on that boy Eliezer Kubanza whenever he would score on him. Oh yeah, like and subscribe as well if you made it to this point in the video. I always save it for the very end, but please do like and subscribe. And follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok. Please do all of these things. If you need to just go and do it right now and come back to the video, totally cool. But yeah, Alvidrez, he was like emoting on the guy, like hitting Fortnite dances whenever he would land like cheeky right hands on the outside or hooks on the outside, sticking his tongue out at him. Kubanza, this dude should just like model for Nike or something, because he looks like a great fighter, but his skills aren't up to co with his physique, man. He has some serious defensive issues. He was getting blasted with his right hand that boy Alvidrez was setting up just behind a couple of jabs. Jab, jab, right hand, and it couldn't miss every single time. This right hand ends up absolutely chinning Eliezer as well, and Herb Dean lets this man take so much damage in between the finishing sequence starting and ending, because Eliezer was talking to Herb Dean and telling him to keep him in the fight, but he was so disoriented that he was never going to get back into it, and he just ended up taking a bunch of damage that he didn't need to take. At the very end, Alvidrez, he does win the fight. He's a W man still, because he understands that both of them came from like really hard upbringings, and that it took a lot for them to get to where they were now to be able to be in a position to potentially win a UFC contract. He apologizes to Eliezer Kubanza, not on like some dickhead shit. He just was like, dude, like, I'm sorry, bro. Like, it had to be me. Which, I mean, like, that's fair enough, you know? It didn't feel disingenuous at all. I think that was a pretty cool thing for him to do. Christopher got a contract, no doubt. He even said, like, in his post-fight, like, I'm so happy that I'm in the UFC now, before Dana White had even confirmed that he was going to get a contract. And it was another one of those performances where it's like, if he doesn't get a contract, then the Dana White's Contender Series is, they're on some BS here, bro. But yeah, rest assured, that guy will be in the UFC. The fourth fight was Jourdain versus Magno Diaz. Magno Diaz is a Fighting Nerds prospect. This fight and the fight afterwards had two Fighting Nerds prospects in it. Magno Diaz got absolutely clobbered in this fight by Jourdain. Jourdain looked like he watched 80 hours of Ilia Toporia's fights. Just like his footage in general. Came out with a crazy jab, boxing Magno Diaz's head off, blasting a low kick. It was a low kick that ended up dropping Magno Diaz for the first time and turned him into a wrestler. And from there, every single time that Magno Diaz would make an attempt to get on the inside using shots or timing takedowns, he would just get reversed by Jourdain. There was a time where he did actually have the back of Louis, and it looked like the fight was going to be finished by Magno Diaz. Louis stays cool, fights the hands, breaks the body triangles, gets the hooks off of him, and he just rolls out every time. Whenever he would get backpacked, he would just get in the turtle, and then he would force the hooks out, and then just elevate Magno Diaz off of his back, and that was working consistently. He was able to escape, he was able to get back to the feet, and continue boxing, and he was very effective in doing all of these things. My bad, it wasn't even the low kick that was the first thing that dropped him. It was a bunch of left hooks that he was using to set up a lead elbow, which smashed Magno Diaz in the first round, and it made him sit. Magno Diaz demonstrated some heart on him to stay in this fight, but he wasn't in the fight after Jourdain demonstrated the difference between him and Diaz in the striking. Jourdain was pulling out flying knees, all types of crazy strikes. In the end, he ended up reversing position on Magno Diaz and getting to a rear naked choke. No hooks in, just straight up just tapped him. Magno Diaz, he was super gassed out. He just had his number, and this was the end of the fight. Jourdain, I mean, not really a scratch on him in this fight. Wins perfectly. It was great. And this is another Jourdain brother at the bantamweight division. It's going to be exciting to see what he ends up doing. We're going to match make all these fighters at the very end of talking about the last fight. But yeah, Jourdain is a welcome addition to the UFC. And this was another performance where it's like, yeah, this guy is getting a contract. So yeah, Vitor Costa versus Damian Pinas. Yeah, the Fighting Nerds, they're being carried by Bruno Brazil and Prates, which is like, it's hilarious. The last 5 Fighting Nerds that we've seen fight in the UFC or on the Contender Series have gotten popped. I guess it's not entirely true if you want to count Cezary Oleksiejczuk as a Fighting Nerd, but like, Fighting Nerds from Brazil at least, they're just getting smashed. Pinas is a name that you can't like talk about without saying his first name before it. You can't just be like, yo, Pinas is in there. Pinas is smashing right now. Vitor Costa can't take the aggression of Pinas. Like, it just doesn't sound right. Damian Pinas. You have to say Damian Pinas every time. He comes from a very tough upbringing. Suriname, and then Aruba he represents as well. He went to Brazil. He fights out of Brazil. He showed the results of his training in this fight. He's doing a good job at his gym. and he earned a contract tonight, which is a further testament to how his progression is coming along in the sport. It was a really strong right hand that opened the fight for Pinas, Damian Pinas, and he rocked Costa with it. Costa was doing all types of weird like head and hand and body feints at range. It looked like he was swatting bees around his face. It was weird. And that was just literally setting up the entries of Damian Pinas whenever he would go first. Damian was absolutely clapping this guy with... Imagine if I said Pinas was clapping this guy. Crazy work, dude. Damian was getting in there. He was going crazy with his right hands. And they were all landing. There was like 3 solid connections. The last one with the right hand, it ended up folding Vitor Costa. It was a walk-off KO, which, I mean, I love seeing those, man. Costa, his backstory was talking about how he came from a household that was broken because of drugs. His father was a crack addict, and that led him himself to be depressed, and that he had to fight his way out of that hole. So, I mean, it sucks that this had to happen, but I mean, this is just a sport that we all love, you know? Sometimes it's this. So yeah, really nice performances. The better men won in every single fight that we watched, except for the first one. I wish that they both could have lost. But so let's recap the event and then match make the fighters who did get contracts. So yeah, Dana White, he gets onto the podium. He has all of his notes with him. He's addressing Vagabov and he says, "You are 7-1 favorite. You told me that you're going to be UFC champion and you struggled against a guy who was a 7-1 underdog." And like, that's not cool, man. So Dana White's like, yeah, unfortunately not. You got to get back in the gym and show me something another time. You're young. And that boy's face looked like he was about... I mean, bro, that's embarrassing, man. Because, I mean, you win the fight, right? You won the fight. It's just that it was boring and it wasn't a fun fight to watch. And, like, that's not the standard. He has to maintain a standard of quality for the Contender Series, or else people think that those types of performances will get them contracts and that they can just do that. No, man. Like, you have to perish violently or your opponent has to perish violently. That's always been the name of the game, at least for this show. So let's talk about all the boys who were able to make that happen. So yeah, Curtis Campbell, I said you give him Christian Rodriguez. Christian Rodriguez has a track record of testing grapplers who are making their debuts in the UFC, these young fighters. I think that Curtis Campbell is going to be a little bit older than an Austin Bashi, for sure older than Raul Rosas Jr. whenever Christian Rodriguez fought him. I think that this is another fair test for him. Christian Rodriguez, I think that he kind of needs to be punished for his decision to not remain at bantamweight. He doesn't belong at featherweight, and this was clearly evident in his last fight against Andre Fili. He doesn't have the frame for it. So if he wants to stay here and he wants to make his money with the grappling and to impose his will through the grappling against these other featherweights, let's see if he can do it against a guy who is very imposing in the grappling and will come out and make him look like he doesn't belong if he's not prepared or if he hasn't found his groove in this new weight class. So I think this is good matchmaking here. Curtis Campbell versus Christian Rodriguez. I think that would be the fight to make for his debut. Next we have Christopher Alvidrez versus Alessio Zaleski dos Santos. Alessio Zaleski dos Santos just lost to Neil Magny, and this is a showcase opponent. I mean, he was up at the very early going in that fight, but that's kind of the strategy that Neil Magny goes for, is to let his opponent get out ahead, create this false sense of security, and then come back on him every time. So, I mean, I think that Alvidrez has the benefit of being youthful on his side. This could be a very easy fight for him to win. I would wager that it would be. I think that he could knock this guy out. But the thing about it is that he would need to have his grappling tested since it wasn't in this fight. His fight on the Contender Series was completely contested in the stand-up. Alessio Zaleski dos Santos will push him to grapple. That would be his path to victory because, I mean, we don't know what type of grappling this guy does have. I mean, the finishing sequence did look kind of messy. He was able to maintain composure and stay cool. I'm sure that he just saw the finish and sprinted towards it, but let's see what happens whenever he's forced to pace himself, whenever the fight does consist of repeated trips to the ground and back up. Let's see if he has the gas to wear through it. The next fight, Jourdain versus Muin Gafurov. Largely the same concerns that I have for Jourdain. Muin Gafurov is a good test for strikers to see if they can grapple. In the striking, Said Nurmagomedov demonstrated that it is possible to finish Muin Gafurov with low difficulty. I mean, sure, it was a submission that Said Nurmagomedov wrapped up against Muin Gafurov, but it was all set up from a high kick that forced a really messy shot out of Muin Gafurov. Jourdain did demonstrate that whenever he has his opponent hurt, he can manage grappling sequences, but whenever they're both dry and fresh, Muin Gafurov would take the first shot, and we can see how he would deal with that. Because, I mean, it did look really scary at a certain point, so that could be an Achilles heel of his. To properly test Jourdain, you give him a grappler to see how he does with it. One that doesn't have the strongest chin, that he still can finish if he finds the opening. So this would be a good test for my boy Louis Jourdain to see what he's made of in this division. I wonder how his brother stacks up as a bantamweight as well. He'll be fighting in Vancouver, so I'll keep an eye out for his debut at bantamweight. They're both in the same weight class. That's lit, man. It's like being the same grade as your brother. Charles Jourdain was talking about if you beat him, then his little brother is going to come and get you, and that's kind of funny. I mean, he's just sicking his brother on everybody. There's obviously going to be a comparison, but I mean, Charles Jourdain, he's certified off of the strength of what he was able to accomplish in the UFC all the way up until this point. Even though he's lost a lot, Louis Jourdain hasn't had the opportunity to be in those types of big, high-profile fights to see like where his skill cap is. I think he'll go far, though. I think that Moon Gafarov is a good first fight for him, too. Next, Damian Pinas versus Mansour Abdul Malik is what I think, right? Mansour Abdul Malik, he's Robin Cody Brundage. This is a failed prospect. So there's not really much to do with him other than to give other prospects the opportunity to build a name off of taking his hype, or whatever hype he did once have. I think that Damian Pinas would be the end. He'd be the end of Mansour Abdul Malik, especially after their last performances. Mansour Abdul Malik's best chances of winning against Damian Pinas would be to stink it up in the grappling and the clinch. And maybe he could win a fight this way. Again, very untested grappling out of Damian Pinas as well. That's the largest question that you have with a lot of these guys off of the Contender Series, since Dana White is looking for a very specific thing. They treat this really like kickboxing more than anything. The guys who aren't able to get to finishes on the ground that easily, there are people like Curtis Campbell who are able to just create a grappling sequence and then land some really nice shots whenever they're in the clinch or whenever he gets the back, and that's how he's able to get to a finish. But otherwise, if you are a stand-up fighter, you're kickboxing for a knockout. And so that's what Pinas was able to secure in this fight. I'd like to see if he could do it against Mansour Abdul Malik, because the result of him being successful would be getting to watch Mansour Abdul Malik get into a fight where he can't just stink it up. And if that forces him to actually be entertaining and to do something, then that works for me as well. So yeah, those are going to be all the matches that I would make for the guys who won contracts on the Contender Series this week. Let me know what you think about this episode. It was a pretty good week, man. I thought it was pretty lit. So I'm going to be working overnight at my job. I will be crafting my picks for UFC 320. That upload will be up tomorrow. Do like, comment, and subscribe if you made it to this point in the video. I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.